On November 24, 1971, at around 8 p.m., at an altitude of 10,000 feet in the sky, two fighter jets of the American Air Force were chasing a flight in which a hijacker was sitting. Who was the hijacker that caused a nationwide sensation in America? And why the FBI, despite being one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world for the past 50 years, unable to locate him, alive or dead? On November 24, 1971, a man appearing to be a businessman boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle. He carried a briefcase and wore sunglasses. At that time, security procedures in the US were minimal. Passengers' luggage was not checked, and their identities don't verified. The aircraft, a Boeing 727 with 36 passenger and 6 crew member takeoff from Portland Airport at 2:50 p.m., was scheduled to make the 45-minute flight from Portland to Seattle. After takeoff at 2:50 p.m., the man handed a note to the flight attendant. He put this note in his bag without looking. Then the hijacker told him to take out this note and read it. When he read the note, it was written that "I have a bomb." Florence Schaffner, revealing that he had a bomb. He then showed her the dynamite and detonator in his briefcase. The man hijacked the plane, demanding $200,000 in cash, 2 parachutes and a fuel truck. He also threatened to detonate the bomb if his demands were not met. The 35 passengers on board were unaware of the situation, with the crew having to keep the hijacking secret to avoid panic. Authorities, understanding the seriousness of the situation, decided to comply with the hijackers' demands. The plane circled near the Seattle airport for about an hour and a half. While preparations were made, during this time, $200,000 in $20 bills was collected from the Seattle National Bank, with the serial numbers recorded for identification. 2 sets of parachutes were arranged through skydiving club after circling for the required time. The plane landed in Seattle after 45 minutes with 5 survivors aboard. As promised, the hijackers' demands were met, and the money was handed over. A bag filled with cash and 2 parachutes were released, and the plane was refueled. After the ransom was provided, the hijacker allowed the 35 passengers and 2 flight attendants to leave the plane, but the pilots and 2 crew members were instructed to remain on board. By nightfall, the plane took off once again. Tina, sitting beside the hijacker, relayed specific instructions to the pilot via the intercom. Among the demands were that the landing gear and flaps be lowered. The plane should maintain an altitude of 10,000 feet and a speed of 320 kilometers per hour, with a direct course to Mexico City. While the pilot complied with most of the demands, a direct flight to Mexico City was not feasible due to fuel constraints. The pilot proposed 2 refueling options, one in Phoenix, which was accepted by the hijacker. Meanwhile, local and federal authorities were monitoring the situation, sending fighter jets to follow the plane. However, the jets struggled to match the slow pace of the hijacked aircraft, forcing them to circle at a distance. At one point, Dan Cooper instructed Tina to join the cockpit, where the pilots and another flight attendant were present. As Tina moved to close the cockpit door, the last thing she saw was the hijacker securing something around his waist. He then opened the rear stairs and jumped into the night, vanishing without a trace. When the plane finally landed, a thorough search revealed no sign of the hijacker, no personal belongings, and no indication of his fate. Despite extensive investigations by the FBI, the mystery of Dan Cooper remains unsolved after over 5 decades. The only clues found were a tie, a cigarette butt, and one of the 2 parachutes he had left behind. There were no photographs of the passengers, and after interviews, a composite sketch of the hijacker was created. The FBI's investigation included tracking the plane's flight path, using its autopilot system and flight recorder. This data pinpointed the location where Cooper likely jumped to an area of dense forest, spanning 45 square kilometers. The search team thoroughly combed the area, but they found no trace of Dan Cooper. his briefcase, or the money. The freezing cold of the region led many to believe that he must have died due to the harsh conditions. However, what followed was beyond the FBI's imagination. For the first time in U.S. history, the case remained unsolved and the FBI withheld details from the public. They released a sketch of Cooper and the serial numbers of the $200,000, along with a reward for any information leading to his capture. Authorities assumed that if Cooper was alive, he would eventually spend the money, but no bills with the matching serial numbers were ever found. The case went cold for nearly a decade until 1980, when a significant discovery was made. On the banks of the Columbia River near a place called Tina Bar in Washington, a child playing with his parents stumbled upon a bundle of cash. The $5,800 in bills were found to have the same serial numbers as those taken by Cooper. This was the first breakthrough in the case in 9 years. But rather than solving the mystery, it deepened the confusion. The money was found about 27 kilometers from the drop zone, raising questions about how it could have traveled that far, especially since the Columbia River flows in the opposite direction. Further investigations revealed that the money had been buried on the beach, indicating someone had intentionally placed it there, possibly years after the hijacking. Despite further excavation and questioning, no new clues were found. Some theorized that Cooper was a highly trained military operative, based on the parachute he used, which was a more complex military model. In addition to the $5,800 recovered in 1980, the rest of the ransom money, totaling $9,700, has never been found. Aside from the sketch and the tie that Cooper had left behind, which suggested he was left-handed, the FBI has little evidence to go on. After 50 years, the case remains open, with no answers in sight. The details are still available on the FBI website, and the investigation continues, leaving many questions unanswered.